All right, guys, we have people pouring in here. So this is very, very exciting. So we've got Nick Agcock and Mike Monavian here, and we are going to dive super deep into stack and tilt. And this is going to be really exciting for me, for everyone out there. I have learned from a specific type of coach who has had a very, very specific system, and I've been sort of a little bit ignorant of the stack and tilt stuff. Obviously, I've watched it over the years, but I'm going to be learning as much as anyone here. So this is going to be really, really exciting. At Skillest, most of you probably know that we are a broad church, as they say, and we love all sorts of swing styles and coaching systems. And we try and embrace as many as we can so that we can find you as a student the perfect coach. And the great thing, we were just having a chat before we jumped onto the webinar about stack and tilt, is that it has an incredible framework. And when you have a framework to work with as a student, you always have something to go back to. You don't stand on that first tee and go, what am I doing here? I'll work at it for 9 holes, get a bit of a feel going. You can stand on that first tee and you can get a feel and an understanding of what you're trying to do straight away because you're working within a framework, which I absolutely love. So, boys, welcome. It's great to have you here. Thanks so much for doing this. We're going to start with Nick, I think. So Nick's going to kick this thing off. I'm just going to let you run with it, boys. So take it away.
All right, thanks, Baden. First of all, thanks for everyone for tuning in today. Thanks for Baden for the opportunity, and thank you to Mike Monavian for being our resident expert today. Appreciate your time and your expertise. So starting from the very beginning, I get this question a lot, is what is stack and tilt? A lot of people think it's a golf swing, when really it's a system for playing golf. It's based on a 3-dimensional description of the swing. That's a lot of words there, but as we go through the presentation, you'll understand the 3-dimensional aspect of it and really how it applies to all players, not just certain types of players. So in a golf lesson scenario, as a coach, you got to know really where to start. And I'd say, as Mike would agree with as well, the present model of grip, aim, stance, and posture is the go-to. The only problem with that, though, is that it's not a common denominator for all the game's best players. So look at the next slide here. You can see on the left-hand side here, we got Zach Johnson with his strong left-hand grip. And on the far right side, we got John Rahm with his weak left-hand grip. So really, those are two of the game's best players, and no two grips there are the same. And in the middle, you got Jim Furyk, who's a top 10 all-time money list player with his double overlap grip. So as a coach, if I'm going to take a student and lead them down the path of learning this great game, and how am I going to decide which grip is best for that player? It's quite easy to see that there's more than one option. Mike, your thoughts there?
Yeah, you could go down the entire driving range of any tour event on any tour, male, female, European, PGA, Australasian, and you'll find people with different ball positions, different grips, different aims, different stances, different postures, and yet somehow the governing bodies have considered those to be fundamental, and yet they're demonstrated as variables.
Absolutely. So we talked about grip, alignment, stance, posture, ball position. Another catalog here would be alignment. So square alignment has been taught for years and years. It's kind of the go-to, obviously. However, we got Arnold Plummer on the left-hand side aiming right to hit his hook. On the right-hand side, we have Lee Trevino aiming left to hit his fade. And in the middle, we have Tommy Fleetwood aiming straight to hit a push draw. So as a coach, how am I to know which alignment is great or best for that player? What if I taught Lee Trevino to aim right? Would we know who he was? Would he be selling used cars? So really using, again, another variable, it would be dangerous to prescribe that for a player. So really, these variables, the grip, the alignment, the stance, and the posture, don't define great play. They are things that you can do differently and still play great, as we can see with all these players here. So that leads us to the next slide, which is a quote from our mentor, Andy Plummer. The swing cannot be understood without considering its function. So the function of the golf swing. What are we trying to do with the golf club in our hands and the golf ball? I can have a perfect grip, perfect aim, perfect stance, perfect posture, but until I move, none of those things really matter. So that begs the question, what is fundamental? What do the game's best players do uniformly? What defines great play? And importantly, too, can we measure them? With all these great devices, Gears, TrackMan, Sam Putlab, video recording, can we measure someone's grip? Is that really that important? Do we measure the stance line? Do we measure 5 degrees open versus 10 degrees open? Do we measure that? I would argue that we don't. So the first fundamental of golf, the first function of the swing would be controlling the low point. That is easily the most basic skill that a golfer can perform. And the wider the dispersion of the contact on the ground, you'd see the handicap level go up and up and up. So that's something we can definitely measure and would be commensurate with the skill level of the golfer. The better the player, the more likely they are to hit the ball first and then the ground. And when they do miss, it's on a smaller margin. I spent the day today at a junior golf tournament here in Orlando, watching a bunch of players from our academy. And there's probably 80 players at the tournament. And on the driving range before the round, contact issues abound, even at that level. These are players looking for college scholarships. So it definitely defines great play and also defines poor play, the ability to control the contact on the ground. Mike?
The real question becomes, to your point, where do you start? Baden, you look at golf swings all day, every day, as does most people here who are in attendance. The question is, where do you start? And, there's theories out there that think that, the low-hanging fruit to study is speed, not even contact or power. The first fundamental task that's demonstrated throughout all players who are any good, and actually all the players who are bad too, is where they make contact on the face. And Baden, we could go into a public area, go into a hotel lobby and just hand every single person who comes in with a club, put a piece of tape on the ground and ask them to hit the line. And we can just measure the dispersion of how far they hit in front or behind that line. And we can get a pretty good estimation of their handicap level. So the question would be, where to start would be contact. If their contact's pretty good, well, what's the next step to now? Well, we could hit little chip shots and you'd shoot 400, hitting 20-yard shots and chipping around the golf course. So the next level would be, just to lead into for Nick, power. You've got to be able to hit it far enough to play the course.
Absolutely. Stack and tilt as a system or as a brand is commonly referred to as just the contact and the curve guys. It's a way to hit it shorter, and you're going to lose distance going to that model. We're all about power, but with every concession for power comes a concession for control. So contact.
If I can interject there, Baden, your country-mate today, Lucas, just won on the PGA Tour today. I'm not sure if you're not aware of that.
Well, guess what? He's actually a Skillest user, so he's coached Dom as a party. Actually,
they were talking about that on the broadcast because of quarantine. Australia being very difficult to come into. But I was very impressed on the last hole when Danny Lee pulled out a driver and just they were saying he was doing his Bryson swing, and he probably had 120 mile per hour plus swing and just hit full send and was on this upslope bank. And then Lucas got up there with a 1-shot lead, hit a 2-iron in the middle of the fairway, put a wedge, almost hold it, spun it back to about 10 feet, and 2-putt, tip cap, Braves trophy, kiss girl. It was very, very tidy. So to the point, he needed to put the ball in the fairway. So he had enough power. I'm going to segue here for a second. Congratulations on the Aussie win. But Tommy Armour III said something incredible years ago when some of the younger guys were kneeling and about not hitting it far enough. And he said, boys, everybody out here can reach the par 5s and 2, in 3. Everybody can reach the par 4s and 2. Everybody can reach the par 3s and 1. How close can you hit it? And then he proceeds to strike a 2-iron from a long par 3 to like 5 feet from the hole. It was just classic Tommy Armour III. But there was a reason why every player who's ever played the game, who's any good, has made a concession at some point to not max out their club head speed. So it's contact first, and then power. So far enough to play the golf course. Does you no good to hit it, 190 mile per hour ball speed if it's, all over the place. So he had trouble left, trouble right, put a 2-iron in the middle of the fairway and hit a wedge into the green. Danny Lee, not to knock him out, but he had driver and had no second shot really to attack because he needed to make birdie. And he missed the green actually with a wedge.
Yeah, totally. No, it's a hard argument at the moment, isn't it? Though it's pretty sexy, all this long driving stuff. I'll tell you what. So it's I couldn't agree with you more. Like, I'm all about that. I talk all day about, I want to see you control a 7-iron that goes 100 yards when it's blowing 40 miles an hour, and you can hold it through the wind, and like that's what gets me excited. But obviously
one of my favorite things to see on a flight scope or TrackMan or quad, these posts with all the tracers. And one of my favorite things to see is not, hey, I got 120 mile per hour club head speed with 180 mile per hour ball speed. No. I want to see 25 shots with one line. I want to see one tracer line, and none of them curve past the target line. They're all just striped down middle. How tight can you make that cone in 3D? That's a ball striker.
Absolutely.
Now, Mike, to your point about the power and the contact, I was working with a player last week at the academy. We're doing our monthly assessments, and we track the kids' club head speed, carry distance, etc. And he measured at about 113 miles an hour club head speed, but the ball's only traveling 255 in the air. And I made the comparison. I pulled up the TrackMan report for another student at the academy and said, this other player swings at 108 but carries at 268 because he's making better contact. So your effort to swing harder and make the ball go further is actually sacrificing you all these yards. So if you can dial it back for me a little bit, you're going to make better contact, your smash goes up, and your carry goes up with less work. So there's always going to be a trade-off, but there's a very close relationship, whether it's driver or an iron.
So we're not saying, as Stack and Tilt authorized instructors, to be clear, we're not saying power doesn't matter. Power matters, but not at the price of losing accuracy.
Absolutely.
Strokes gains really stink in the water.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's keep moving, boys, because this could go for 2 hours, I reckon, if we get going.
Absolutely.
So we'll keep moving, because everyone out there, hold on to your questions as well, think them up. Maybe you can write them in the chat if you want, but we will, with 15 minutes to go, we'll be answering every question you've got as well.
So the third in our fundamentals is going to be curve. As Mike was saying, a predictable start direction, trajectory, and curve for each shot. That's really the mark of a ball striker. Now, as the skill levels change, you're going to have different levels of focus. So in the work on the PGA Tour, coaches are spending the majority of their time honing the curve. If it's windy, we work on flighted shots. I work for the Sean Foley Academy, and Sean often refers to the British Open as the swing ruiner. You get that hard wind off the right, start aiming left. Things change pretty quickly there. So having a predictable start direction, trajectory, and curve for each shot is really the mark of a great ball striker. So we've got contact, we've got power, we've got curve. So those are all fundamentals, but they're also skills. It's nothing technique related. Stack and Tilt is branded as this, get on your left side, stay on your left side, and just, pound driver into the ground method of swinging the golf club. When in reality, the three fundamentals aren't technique related at all. They're skills. Those are tasks that you would perform as a golfer. So moving forward into the system part of the conversation, systems get sort of a bad rap in golf for being very one-dimensional and whatnot, and not really a necessity. But you can see in the slide here, systems are all over the world, and they're really what makes the world run. We all drive a car. We know when we get to a red light, that means stop. You've got signs for where to go, where your exit is. If you don't follow those rules, there's chaos. But even more so when there is no system, you get more chaos. As you can see in the slide here, this is from, I believe this is somewhere in Ethiopia, but this is a very famous intersection where there's no rules. Just come as you are. And I would say that a lot of the golf instruction publicly lacks a system because you want to teach the student in front of you. You would approach the student as a blank slate and see what they've got to work with. when in reality, you want to have some framework that they're going to fit inside of. And then from there, it's going to show you where you need to go with what you're doing.
Nick, if I can just take a moment on this one slide.
Absolutely.
Every driver is driving the car that they're in. Every car is different air pressure in the tires, different maintenance levels in the engine. Everybody's going in different directions. And some are driving cars, some are driving buses. But on the slide before, if you want to pull that up, everybody's actually assuming to follow the rules of the road. Everybody's in their lines, designated, cars are turning together, designated areas, people are walking in a designated area, yet this intersection is completely different than the next intersection that they're going to hit. So, this golf course is different than the next golf course, yet this student is different than this student. You can still have a systematic way to approach this without being cookie cutter. I know in some parts of the country, they call them roundabouts. We call them rotaries. I don't know what you have down there, Baden, or Nick, what you had in Canada. But we have these circular things you have to drive around, and they're chaotic to some point. And, some of them are removed in order to have lights and order. And yet it's a different road in a different place. And yet they're all the same in a sense. So having a system isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, can you imagine the doctors on the right side of the screen saying, we're just going to wing it today. We're just going to teach the leg that's in front of me or amputate the leg that's in front. No, there's a systematic, orderly way where, especially in the medical world, nothing's left to chance. You got procedures for x-rays, you got procedures for MRIs, you got procedures for sterilization, you got procedures for airflow. Everybody's masked up with, PPEs. So there's all sorts of systems in place in order to make sure that things go a certain way. They have a predictable outcome for the client, for the patient, for the golfer.
Absolutely. So I guess that begs the question, what makes Stack and Tilt a system? It's not a method, in that a method would be very procedural. To me, a method would be like baking a cake. I've got a series of directions I've got to follow. If I don't follow them to a T, I don't get a cake. I get a big pile of mush in the pan. So we need to have some flexibility in what we're doing. However, a method would have you starting with the grip, and then you had to get the address position perfect before you could go to club parallel in the backswing. And then once that was good, we could go to arm parallel in the backswing. And you would never get to really hitting the golf ball until you mastered all 9 steps or 10 steps in that golf swing. So just to give you an example for some different systems inside of the Stack and Tilt world, this is what we call the grid. This is just a way to break down the different options a golfer has based on the club they're swinging, the shot they're trying to hit. It's a way for a coach to understand and then attach a outcome to different components. Now, I think where, as a Stack and Tilt coach, we have an advantage because we actually have things in writing, where the average coach definitely has a system. He would have to, but it's not in writing, in that there's no really a big leg to stand on there. There's some flexibility in terms of what comes down the pike next month, what's in vogue. Yes, Michael.
One of my favorite conversations of all time, and you guys can Google it, is Butch Harmon speaking to the Met PGA a few years ago. And somebody asked him, he made the point first that he doesn't teach a system, doesn't teach a method. Those Stack and Tilt guys are crazy. Okay. The follow-up question after he made that statement was, so how do you set up if you don't have a system, how do you determine what to say to the student? And he said, well, first thing I do is I look at the divots, then I look at the ball flight, then I look at his grip, then I look at his stance. So isn't that a system, that you're a logical progression that you're following? No, I don't teach a system. You can call it what you want, but if you're a golf instructor and you don't have a systematic approach, you're garbage, or you're a liar. Every single person who's ever taught a lesson has had some sort of formula in their head that, wow, this student stinks. I have an image in my head of what they should do. How do I draw that so that now the student sucks less? How do I do that? Well, I have to have a procedural way to do that. Another way for a procedure is called a systematic approach. So you're using one whether you like it or not. Let's just hope your system's pretty good.
Another example, fair enough, yeah. Another example would be the shot tree. It would be, I would say, irresponsible for any golf instructor to make a recommendation to a student about a change or an adjustment without knowing what the ball is doing, first of all. The goal of the game is to get the ball in the hole, not to look pretty at P4. So the shot tree system here designates the different ball flights. I won't go through the whole description there, but for example, if you look at diagram 1 on the left-hand side, you can see shot H, a bit of a pull draw there. Look at diagram 3, shot E, looks very, very similar. However, they both get to the same spot in a very different way, in that shot number 1 is pulling more than it's curving. Shot 3E curves more than it pulls. If I give the golfer the fix for shot 1H for his 3E shot, I'm going to make that golfer worse. Baden, I'm sure you can relate back into the late 90s of golf instruction, in that when you're coming over the top and you're seeing that ball go left, they tell you to swing more into out, when in reality you were already too much into out.
I think somebody like Mario does that, don't they?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So that's just an example of the classification of the shots that's necessary in order to make an informed decision before you cut into that golfer, so to speak. So I mentioned in the what is stack and tilt slide earlier, the three-dimensional description of that golf swing. We've got flexion extension, tilting, which is where people kind of pull back a little bit, and rotation. I'm going to go through these next 3 slides in a pretty quick manner. Then Mike's going to pull up his gear system and show us what these things are in a three-dimensional sense on live video. So flexion extension is the forward bend and the standing up motion that the golfer would make. At address, the golfer is bent forward to the top of the backswing. They're extending their spine. The second we talked about was rotation. That's the golfer rotating 90 degrees in the backswing. Now the golfer is extending, side bending or tilting, and rotating at the same time, which is how that golfer maintains a steady head. That'll make more sense again in a moment here with Mike's demonstration. The tilting or the side bending, or lateral flexion as it's called, in the downswing, that's the golfer moving their hips towards the target. You can see the gentleman in the red shirt there, his belt buckle is ahead of the buttons on his shirt. That's the side bend. And then if you look at the golfer in the black sweater, he has the same angle from his belt buckle to what would be the buttons on his shirt. The difference there is he's turned 90 degrees. So the golfer is maintaining that side tilt or that side bend during the downswing and into the finish. Lastly, flexion extension makes an appearance again in the follow through as the golfer is standing up and pushing out of the ground. That's a huge source of power for the golfer, as well as a way to shallow the descent of the golf club into the ground. Mike will talk in a moment here about the driver. I would argue that stack and tilt was made for the driver, in that the flexion extension, pushing the hips forward and upwards, is what's going to shallow that impact for you, and let you hit more into out at the ball, up on the ball slightly if needed, and help you draw the golf ball a lot better. Lastly, before I turn it over to Mike here, why the name stack and tilt? Really, it should be tilt and stack, which is what I believe Andy proposed to Golf Digest originally.
Yep.
But the idea here is that the golfer is tilting to the side, or to the target side, to the left for a right-handed golfer, in order to keep the body stacked. So by tilting left, the golfer keeps his upper center over top of his lower center. If he didn't do that, he would move off the golf ball to the right for a right-handed golfer. That would be the translation off the target. So we've got rotation, we've got side bending, and we've got flexion extension. Those are our three-dimensional movements in the golf swing. Mike?
Yeah, I'll see if I can share my screen here. Let me know if you guys see that okay.
There we go.
Okay, so from the face-on view of this, pardon me, from the down the line view, you'll see that this golfer is tilted forward 57 degrees, whatever that number is. He's tilted forward. By the time he takes it to the top of the backswing, his spine is actually extended. So where you can see from the down the line view better how his spine was bent forward. You can see the yellow parts of the virtual spine there. By the time he takes it to the top of the backswing, you'll see that that spine is no longer bent forward. And a couple of the other ways to look at this is that at address from face on, his shoulders are tilted 10 degrees to the player's right. By the time he takes it to the top of the backswing, I'll just play this and move the camera at right angles to the spine. You'll see that now by the time he gets to the top of the backswing, his left shoulder is lower than his right shoulder. So from the down the line, he's tilted his shoulders from, what do we say, 10 degrees tilted to the right. Now, was that 33 degrees tilted to the left by the time he's at, the top of the backswing. So that's lateral flexion in the frontal plane. And then on the downswing, if we keep the camera at right angles again to the spine, you'll see that he's tilting his spine throughout the swing. And then at the finish, he's pushed his pelvis more up and forward than it was at address. So I'll even pull up the, I'll overlay where his pelvis was in the beginning to where it is in the follow through. You'll see that the blue is the before and yellow is the finish. His spine has gone from bent forward in blue to bent backwards. So any golfer who's any good does these motions throughout the history of time. The worst players, if I can just take a moment here to pull up Mrs. Haverkamp, who I affectionately call Mrs. Haverkamp.
You're not using my swing, are you, Mike?
I am not. But this would be Mrs. Haverkamp, who is bent forward. Now, the golf swing has been taught in years to be just a turn and a turn. This lady's turned all the degrees. She's got her right knee inflection, her right ankle inflection, her pelvis inflection, her upper spine inflection, her neck inflection, and she's rotated 90 degrees. However, that isn't demonstrated by the best players in the world. They change their forward bend into extension in the follow through and in the backswing. Some people say they can't see it in the backswing because the extension, their head didn't raise up. Well, the head didn't raise up because they're replacing it with side bending. So by the time you take it to the top of the backswing, the head won't raise because the players replace that with side bend. And we've got all the numbers here to validate the amount of side bend a player has. So, for example, this player had 6 degrees of side bend in his thoracic spine or his rib cage in this one. Now he's extended that spine 3.515 degrees to the negative. So that's 9 degrees of extension just in the rib cage while he's turned and rotated. So.
You're probably going to address this, Mike, no doubt. But how do you think about sort of setup variations with different clubs as well to then affect how easy it is to hit driver or whatever club you're hitting? So is there any difference between what you do with a wedge as opposed to hitting driver?
So no different than driving on a back road versus driving on an 8-lane highway in Los Angeles. They're both roads. So one's going to accommodate more speed than the other one. So if you're hitting a wedge, you need less power variables, you need more accuracy variables. And when you're hitting a driver, there's a concession for some of that control for some more power. So you're going to do more of the same. You're not going to use a new whole system. So today I'm going to drive on the highway. I'm going to take an F1 Formula race car. No, I'm going to use my regular, SUV to get around town, but I'm going to go faster. So I'm going to do more of these pieces. Bunker shots, short game shots, putting. There's the onus isn't on power. So you're going to use smaller levers and you're going to use a system to approach the person in front of you or the shot in front of you. So that's the flexibility of the system, is that there's an answer for everything by adding and removing components. And that's what a system allows you to do. We had this discussion at the last PGA show in 2020 for an hour and a half. It was a shouting match of people saying there's no system, everybody's different. Well, we know everybody's different. I don't know a single golfer or golf instructor who doesn't coach the person in front of them. It's the stupidest statement to make. And yet you should have a comprehensive system that can explain every different situation that you're allowed in. That's a good system. If you have a specialization and you can only teach a certain golfer, then we're going to get to the point where you're going to get golf instructors who only teach 4-foot putts that break from left to right. That's my specialization. right? A specialist knows more and more about less and less until he knows everything about nothing. So you've got to have a system that's comprehensive enough in order to explain all the outliers as well as all the kind of the bell-shaped curve. So I think we're done with gears for a little bit. We can bring it back if need be. I'll move it back to.
That's cool.
There.
Awesome.
All right. So how can we take this to the driving range? How can we make this actionable for the golfer listening to this today? We've used a couple big words so far: flexion extension, lateral flexion. But how can the average 20 handicap go to the driving range this afternoon and make their game better? So as an on-ramp to the system, Stack and Tilt uses a 10-word framework that helps the average golfer get their start, at least improving some of their pieces. If I had 2 words to give to a golfer that would give them a chance, the first 2 words I would use would be wait forward. Now forgive this screen here, I'm a left-handed golfer, so you're getting a mirror version of what you would normally see. On the lesson tee on an average day, you see a lot of the picture on the left. The weight's back, kind of getting behind the ball, trying to hit up on it, try to hit it up in the air. Good contact, compression, solid contact comes from having the weight forward, the handle forward, hitting down into the golf ball. So if I was going to have 2 words for a golfer to give them a chance, I think I would start with weight forward. From there, we mentioned the side bend or lateral flexion. Those 2 words be shoulder down. So that's the golfer's lead shoulder moving down and across their body. You can see on the left-hand picture how my lead shoulder, my right shoulders come up and across. My chin is moved upwards. You can see my face at the top of the backswing there. On the right-hand side, my right shoulders come down and across. My spine is stacked up over top of my hips. My right ear is lower to the ground than my left ear. My body is centered. Going back to the fundamental tasks of a golfer, the first one being solid contact. If solid contact is my number 1 goal, that's going to give me a limited framework to work within in order to accomplish that. So if my goal is solid contact and I look at the picture on the left, I have to do a lot of work in my downswing to make that happen. So the task would then dictate what my options are in terms of how I move my body. That's really where this framework comes from. So shoulder down would be my second 2 words.
So Nick, you're not saying that if you live in Florida, you live in Orlando, and you're going to go to New York, you could get on I-95 or I-4 to I-95 and head north. But you could also get on, you could also go west for a couple of hours for no apparent reason and still get to New York. It just wouldn't be the most efficient way. But your GPS, global positioning system, would allow you how to maneuver around traffic and around mountains and around least efficient ways to kind of kick you back.
Right. Whenever there's an accident, SEER even tells me, hey, we're rerouting you. Here's a better way to get there.
Wow.
So next on our 10-word framework is going to be hands in. This is where power makes its first appearance. Moving my hands inward on the arc allows me to create some potential energy. If you think back to the NFL kickers of the 50s and 60s, they kicked in a straight line, okay, and a long field goal was like 30 yards. And then they started watching the soccer players in South America kick their penalty kicks, and they kicked them on an arc. Football for whoever's listening across the pond. So the soccer players would kick their penalty kicks in an arc, and they could kick that ball 60 yards in the air, no problem. So the NFL players adapted and started kicking their field goals and their kickoffs in an arc, and the distance went through the roof. So moving the hands in a circle around the body is a lot quicker, or a lot more potential energy than moving the hands in a straight line down the target line. Also from a curve standpoint, getting the hands in on the backswing sets you up to hit a draw. I see the player on the left-hand side with their arms moving down the target line quite often in golfers who cut across the ball and lack distance. So hands in would be another 2 words. Circling back to contact for a minute here, arms straight would be my 7th and 8th word I would use. I see a lot of the golfer on the left-hand side here trying to keep their head down for too long. Eventually they run out of rope and they have to bend their arms to avoid the ground. So the well-meaning friend who tells their friend, oh, you looked up on that one, keep your head down next time. Invariably, this picture comes up pretty quickly with the arms having to flex through the golf ball to avoid the ground. So you can see on the right-hand picture, my hips are maybe a little bit higher, a little bit more forward, but my arms are staying straighter longer to keep the radius of the swing the same. I'm not bending my arms and changing how long the club is. Lastly, my last two words would be tuck hips. Thinking back to Mike's picture of Mrs. Haverkamp, my hips are back, my shoulders are forward. It's like I'm looking through a telescope or something, trying to see the planets. The golfer on the right-hand side is standing taller. They're extending out of the ground. They're leveraging their power through the use of the flexion extension component. So they're standing taller. The hips are more forward. That's going to help them shallow the divot for the driver, for the iron, hit the ball higher, and curve it the way they want to. So usually for myself, left to right as a draw player, for Mike, from right to left. So those are my 10 words. I got weight forward, shoulder down, hands in, arms straight, and tuck hips. That'd be a great place to start for the average golfer who lacks a framework to start from.
And Nick, how many of your lessons wrap up into something as simple as those two words?
I'd say 98% leave with 4 words or less.
Yeah.
Of the average.
So there's
golfer.
a lot of sophistication to get, the hands in at P5, let's say, left arm parallel in the downswing. There's a lot of sophistication of how to extend your hips and tuck them and extend your spine and the follow through. However, we're here as instructors to make our students smarter, not dumber. So you're coming in for an education in order to get the skills so that you can teach yourself how to do this in time and space using all the coordinated parts of your joints and your body. So learning all that is, kind of can just be cued in by saying, just tuck your hips. Oh yeah, I know what that means because Nick just explained for an hour with me what and how to do that by using each of the joints from the ankles to the knees to the pelvis to the thoracic to the cervical all the way up to the finish.
Absolutely. In a given day, I might work with my 8 a.m. lesson is a 25 handicap, and we're using 4 to 6 words total. My 9 to 5 at the Sean Foley Academy is with elite juniors, where we're going a bit more in depth with how the joints move. We're getting more university level discussions. And then after work, I'm doing lessons on Skillest, and I'm trying to be an effective communicator. So maybe I'm back to 6 words again. The goal of the swing is always the same, but the involvement of the language and what the student can comprehend is always going to be how I approach that student. I'm not saying the same words to everybody. It's adaptable to the student that's in front of me. The system is adaptable.
And that's one of the challenges, I think, for coaches and students, isn't it? Is that when you do have a framework and there's lots of information within it, you need to use the information for good and not for evil. I know that in the past, you can just deep dive and go so deep in things that it ends up, you end up using it for evil, and you block your pathway. So it's, as great as it is to have all of this framework and all this information, both coaches and students need to know what's applicable and how to use it and not use it for evil, as I said.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've got a great graphic for that one, actually. I don't believe students need more information. They need more understanding, and they need to understand how to make the information relevant to them. I think I can pull this up here and talk myself through it. No, I didn't find it. If I find it, I'll pull it up. Sorry.
All right, boys, we're moving along quite well here. So we're already 41 minutes into this thing. We've got a few questions. How are you feeling? Nick, do you want to sort of keep going with what you've got, or do you want to answer some questions?
Let's get to the questions.
Actually, I just found it. Found it.
Let's go, Mike.
It'll take 2 seconds. Here we go.
That's all right. But yeah, anyone out there, if you've got any questions, just let us know. The last sort of 20 minutes here or so, we'll answer anything you need.
So quick slide here: data, information, knowledge, insight, wisdom. Conspiracy theory is great, but knowledge and wisdom are the 2 here we're looking for really information and knowledge. The information's out there. It's just getting getting it applicable to you.
Yeah, 100%. Oh, that's great. Okay, got a couple of questions here. So this comes from Joseph. So what is stack and tilt stance on wrist hinge and release through impact? There's a growing popularity of passive or a body release versus the roll of the hands release. Also sounds like the flying wedge concept makes players hold on to their wrist angles too long and could affect power. What do you think?
Well, I'll take a stab at this first, Mike. That's a fantastic question.
Yeah,
one that I deal with on a daily basis. I would say the idea, it sounds great in years past to the phrase "take your hand out of the golf swing." You don't want to be a handsy player. I would argue that every player needs to be a handsy player. The question is, what are your hands doing? Are they educated? If you had no hands, you had no connection to the golf club. The other issue with this phenomenon is Instagram. Nobody will ever post their golf swing with a 4-iron because there's too much release. It doesn't look good. If you toured the PGA Tour driving range before a tournament, you would look at drivers, 3-woods, 4-irons, and they look horrendous. The 8-iron with that held off finish, the straight arms, the flying wedge, it looks great on camera. However, definitely the loading of the wrists in the backswing, a gun is only useful if it's going to be fired. So whatever is loaded needs to be unloaded at the same time. There's a lot of coaches who propagate the flying wedge, and it's useful to a degree with a beginner player. But at the end of the day, whatever you load, you need to unload.
Yeah, cool. Great answer. Okay, so having adopted the stack and tilt a little more than a year ago, this comes from Andy, right? He tends to over-rotate over a straight right leg. So as he straightens his right leg, he feels like it's over-rotating him. Whereas with a conventional swing, turning into a slightly flexed right leg, it seems to act as a natural governor on the amount of rotation at P4. Are there any suggestions?
Mike,
So essentially, that's a good question. So obviously, do you want to talk about a preference of like changing knee flex, I suppose, isn't there, to create depth of rotation in stack and tilt, and that's causing a little bit of over rotation. This guy feels.
So I would start with first of all the golf club that they're hitting. If it's there's going to be a different amount required for each golf swing. The other factor I look at is how much flexing and extending are they doing with the legs at what rate? If it's too soon, I can max out that right leg by P2. I'm not going to have much left to go on and be forced to use other components to finish that golf swing. So I would say the what and the when and the how is very, very important. The other factor I look at is the amount of right foot flare. If there's too much, you've almost got too much freedom to go in that one direction and not in the other. So it's a system in that I'm not going to prescribe every single player that's in front of me that they have to have their feet turned out 10 degrees. If a player is over rotating, yeah, I might turn them in a little bit more to where they're out 5 degrees. So it's definitely going to be applicable to the player. I would say with majority of the senior golfer, we're turning them out more to give them more range of motion. But with the player who's got too much, I might have them go less.
But you wouldn't necessarily say maintain a little bit of flex in the right knee. It's literally, it'll be the foot flare more than anything else.
Well, the foot flare is going to, it's going to influence the amount of internal or external hip rotation.
Yeah.
There are players on the tour who hit it great with a slightly flexed right knee. They're not all going rod straight every time. So it's obviously it's tough to say without seeing the golf swing. However, if they're maxing out the right leg but not hitting any further, then we're going to look at where they're lacking in other areas. Maybe it is the side bending to the top of the backswing.
Cool. Awesome. Great question, Andy. Thanks for that. Mike, I'll give you this one. So how different is stack and tilt to Morad? And do you want to sort of explain potentially the difference for people that don't know what Morad is, I suppose? Jump on that one.
Sure. So Morad, McElgrady's research and development, or Mann's, there was another acronym for it, but if we can draw the analogy from Copernicus, thinking that there was the sun was the center of the earth, he almost got killed for that, by the way. Everybody believed that the earth was the center of the universe. He came with a different paradigm shift and said that the sun was the center of the universe. and that all the solar system went around in circles. And then I think it was Kepler said, no, you're wrong, your research is wrong. And then when Kepler died, Kepler's assistant, Tycho Brahe, looked at the research of both of them and said, actually, my mentor was wrong. It was more like what Copernicus said, but actually they were ellipses, they weren't circles. So does that now invalidate the Copernican theory of a heliocentric model? And then, years later, using Galileo's telescopes, another astronomer said, you know what? There's something happening to this orbit out here. There's got to be another planet. So years before the planet was seen, they predicted on such and such date that another planet would be here. And that was, I think, Neptune or whatever it was. So the point was, what's the difference between what Mach had created in Morad and Stack and Tilt? Well, Mach's contribution to golf should never be disqualified. It's unbelievable. What he did, taking Homer Kelly's golfing machine, taking the 13 sections and saying, you know what, this is too random and there's not enough specifics here. What's a random sweep basically on a backswing? There were so many arbitrary words in there. And Mach was really the first person, the only person who brought medical language and how the anatomy works and the muscles work throughout to the golf machine and added upon it. So he built upon his forefathers, basically. And then what Andy did is built upon Morad to make it more easily. But by the way, where's the Morad book, right? We've all been waiting for 30 years for the Morad book. It never came out. It would have been great. And, you get snippets here and there. But, Mach created the P system because it articulated a time and place from both the caddy view and the down the line view in 3D where the club was in time and space, which now you get the science guys who are now completely dismissing this whole era of golf sciences, dismissing everything that came before them and putting time or mid backswing. When you ask one of these, I think it was Dr. Kwon said, what's the definition of mid backswings? When the pressure is furthest to the right. Well, I have videos here of players whose pressure never goes past the midline of the body. So do they ever make a backswing by his definition? So using what came before us and building upon it is really the benefits of both the golf machine, Morad, and why we have Stack and Tilt. Now, to address specifically some of the differences in Morad and Stack and Tilt, Andy and Mike really were the ones who talked about the third dimension of the extension of the swing. Mach really didn't have that in any of his papers. You can see in his golf swing, Mach's personal swing, and in his teachings, he wanted the butt end of the club to be level to where it was from P1 to P2. He didn't want any rise in the handle from 1 to 2, where in Mike and Andy's system in Stack and Tilt, there's rise from the beginning because it's a circle and an arc. So the rise of the club from P1 to P4 comes primarily from the extension, the side bending, and the retraction of the trail shoulder. Whereas in Max, he had the short arc backswing. We're making sure that the handle, would bend the most. You'd load the P2 at PA2 at P2. TJ Eaton was a shout out for you. Making sure that he had the short arc backstroke arc at P2. So that's just one of the changes. Also, the vestibular ocular response that Mach kept both of his, he was the first person to talk about the VOR, but he didn't like as much side bend in the cervical spine. He liked to keep it a little bit more to the right as he turned, and then if anything, he'd extend out of it late from like 3 to 4, where Mike and Andy would produce a little bit more gradual extension from 1 to 4 in all of those joints. So there are some very subtle differences in the two systems, but again, if it wasn't for Morad, there wouldn't be Stack and Tilt. So
yeah, and we need to celebrate that. I think we're all, we're just all standing on the shoulders of giants and, trying to learn and get better and make everyone, trying to get people better. So it's to be celebrated. I think that's for sure. So let's, all right, we'll keep going. We've got some cool questions here. Okay, so we've got some technical stuff. So some people that are having like personal problems with their golf swing sort of thing. So this is Matt, right, from the UK. So any chance you can run through the takeaway? I get the idea of the shoulder down and the hands in, but I'm one of those that habitually has a flattish shoulder turn and hands not in enough. What success have coaches had with helping students overcome this? How did they achieve it? And is it just a case of hitting 1,000 golf balls and to get the habit ingrained? or what would you suggest for someone who's traditionally flat with the shoulders, still out with the arms?
I'll let Nick answer the first part of that question, but I want to answer the second one first. If you asked me to pick that up and I went and picked up this cup and you actually wanted me to pick up my Methodist mug here, I wouldn't need to do finger exercise or pick it up 10,000 times in order to pick it up better. I have to have an understanding of what the task is in order for my body to follow the motor program in order to pick up the correct item. So you have to have master's mat. You need to have an understanding of what the task needs to be. And then you can start practicing the piece to do it in order for it to become ingrained.
Yeah.
I think that's important to know.
Yeah, that's cool.
Absolutely. Mac, I would start with, again, tough to say without seeing the golf swing. However, I would say starting with the left ear moving down is where I would probably start first, that tilting of the neck. If I keep my head still and I try to move my shoulder down, I'm going to probably maybe go off the golf ball a little bit more. So building in maybe that neck tilt even at P1 is going to help produce the shoulder trajectory you need to get the shoulder down, which can help correct the hand path earlier in the backswing. So I'd say as a coach, I use the neck tilts, on the hour by the hour. The cervical spine is the most mobile part of the spine. It's a shame that we try to keep this head in a box and not move it at all, when in reality, utilizing the freedom of range of motion you've got really makes everything else a lot easier. Good question.
Great question. Okay, cool. All right. So I think Kevin's got a couple of questions here. For someone that does finish like Mrs. Haverkamp and doesn't tuck their hips, what are the best drills?
Well, Kevin should just do what I showed him the first time very well. I'm glad you're here, Kevin. I appreciate the questions here. And since you've heard me say the same things, why don't I let Nick take this one as well?
Well, as a drill, I would just start with my weight all the way forward and practice chipping balls, raising the handle, extending my spine all the way up. Really just forcing myself to make the extension move happen quicker. I would even play the ball back and try to hit the ball high for a time being, just trying to overdo the extension of the spine, raising the belt line all the way to the finish. But as Mike said to the earlier question, understanding what the task is, I think it's the first key. If I can't do it without a golf ball and a golf club in my hand, just do the motion, then I really probably can't do it with a ball and a club as well. A great example for those who don't follow is Ayumi Hori on Instagram. She does so many descriptions on a daily basis of her students' demonstrations. And in the majority of the work is being done without a club in their hand, just understanding how the body is supposed to move. Shout out Ayumi.
Yeah, cool.
Another thing I'd add for Kevin is to film yourself, look at it. Are you doing enough of the pieces that you want to see? Practice it, practice it, film it, get your feedback of how much you're doing in order to facilitate the amount you need.
Cool. All right, a couple more questions. So this is from Justin. So I get my hands too deep inside on the backswing and the plane far too in to out on the downswing, exposing the heel at impact. What's a good drill? So this is someone with probably the opposite problem, right? And is trying to get the framework right, but overdoing it potentially.
So I'll take that one if you want.
Okay.
What I like to do is I'll even pull it up on Gears here just to be fancy a little bit, because Nick Taylor expects me to be fancy on podcasts nowadays. So one of the drills that I like to do is put a shaft, just as you see here on the downswing, on the back part of the arc, and make sure that by the shaft parallel to the ground that you're not turning too fast so that the butt end of the club or the shaft itself will be breaking the plane. So from face on, I would put a golf club just about where this cursor is, or an alignment rod into the ground on the angle of the shaft, so that when you make a backswing, you're not over rotating faster than you are tilting and extending. So we're working in 3 dimensions. So you want to make sure that if the question here, just to reiterate, was that your plane is shifting too far to the right, put an alignment rod on the plane so that you can measure how much is too much and coordinate it, and again, film it to make sure that your hands aren't too sucked inside or you're crossing the plane there.
But it is that initial plane. Sorry.
You're good. Just to tack onto that, I see this on a daily basis with our junior program. The juniors, that we coach on a daily basis are they're doing too much of the good things, which can become cancerous after a while. For a player who I see with the club too far inside at P2, chances are they're using the lower body too much too early. I would say that golf club's got to travel, like the club head especially, has got to travel, let's say, 14 feet from address to the top of the backswing. My right hip has got to move about 5 inches from address to P4. So that club head, by definition, better have a big head start. If I'm using my lower body to start the backswing at P1 right away, I'm going to max out very early and things are going to be too inside too quickly. So I'd really work to get the sequence of pieces moving improved with that feedback piece that Mike mentioned.
So that's one of the great things about stack and tilt. We have the amounts and the rates of what and when and where they should happen. So pulling up gears one more time, one of my favorite things to highlight on Mike Bennett's swing here is looking at it from above with the body lines. For example, if we look at his knee stance line, which is very not commonly talked about, by P1 to P2, we can see that the knees have turned 12 degrees from the target line. From P2 to P3, they're at 22. Is that P2? A little further up. So then at P3, they're turned 24 degrees, so another 12 degrees. And then by the time we got it to P4, they're at, well, the max was 29 degrees. So you're looking at roughly 10 to 12 degrees from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4. So it's, you know, you could have a golfer like our first question we had who does all of the knee extension from 1 to 4 in that first 1 to 2 area. And Baden, that's one of the things I would tell that golfer: keep your right knee bent. As blasphemic as that sounds as a stack and tilt instructor, how would you slow down the knee extension is to add in knee flexion of a feel. So that's the liberty that I have in my toolbox in stack and tilt. You can do too much and too little of anything. Can you put your weight too far forward? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Can you have your weight too far back? Yeah. When and where and the rates matter. So
and just because you're telling someone
more freedom than we do as instructors. I'm not rigid into teaching a certain method or a certain way that it has to be a certain thing.
Yeah. And telling someone to keep their right knee flexed doesn't mean it's actually going to be flexed as well. That's the other thing as well. So just using terminology doesn't mean it's actually going to be that thing either. So, okay. So this might be, what do we got? Two more questions, right? So what do you think is the biggest reason some students do have difficulty with stack and tilt, with the concepts and with driver compared to the irons? And what do you think could be the solution? So this is, I actually got an email about this as well. It was a question straight away. As soon as I sent out, the email that we're doing a stack and tilt webinar, first email back was, can I do this with driver? Right. So you must get it all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. All the time. I would say the player who struggles with the driver is doing too much of one thing and not enough of another, meaning the weight forward piece feels great, but they lack the extension that they need from, I would say, as early as P6 all the way to the follow through. They've overdone the weight forward and they've run out of railroad, and here we go. Troy Madison, there we go. They've got no problem with the weight forward, but they need the extension piece in the downswing to counteract that and to shallow the descent. The best drives in the world are hit at about 1 degree down on the PGA Tour.
Yeah.
So here's Mike and Andy were asked to do a DVD. This was their second DVD that they did, and they had, I think, 15 tour players or so there. And this was Troy. He hit the longest ball that day at tour average launch with 81% of his weight forward at P4. He tried to do an 80-20 swing. That year, it was the first time he hit 60% of his fairways, and they got a late start to the season. So he was career higher in driving distance, top 10, over 300 yards average for the rest of the year. He shot the lowest back-to-back round still to this day, 61-61, all while being top 5 in greens regulation. So the anonymous attendee who's already asked a Mac question and an anti-driver question, I love you. I just want to highlight who you are. which is fine. I want the questions. I think Nick and I are better for it because of questions like this. However, those who say stacking tilt doesn't work with the driver haven't ever put forth any proof that it doesn't work with the driver. Charles Howell III led the field at the Players this year in strokes gained driving over 72 holes. He was number one. Not three, not two, but one.
If someone is having trouble with, what are they with driver though? I suppose, what could they be doing too much of or not enough of, do you think?
Anything, any variable you can do too much or too little of. So making sure that the ball is at, at B0 or maybe one up, or maybe one back, somewhere in that ball position range, making sure you get enough extension to match the side bend, making sure that you're doing the braking aspect of this properly. I mean, why does anybody stink at any club? Just because the ball's in the air. I mean, if we bring, Nick, if you wouldn't mind bringing your slide up with the vertical swing plane, the horizontal swing planes up.
Yeah,
I'll stop sharing this.
Let's see here.
Remember that slide where we got
to your point, Mike, as well. I think players who typically struggle with the driver, who are doing what they think is stack and tilt, chances are they haven't learned it from an authorized or network instructor.
That's a
lot
great
of
point.
players who read the book or watch the DVDs, or Nick Taylor, Rob Cheney have a lot of great information on YouTube. They try to teach themselves how to do it, and it becomes their own version of it. Probably missing one of those key pieces, like Mike mentioned. Give me 1 second to get back to that grid slide.
Yeah, here it is. So perfect. So this may look like a lot, and it's one of the more advanced diagrams that we have in the network. In the upper right, where the vertical swing plane, you'll see there's a 1-to-1 ratio on a 45-degree vertical swing plane. And as that vertical swing plane goes to 0, it's 90 degrees. So the path on any ball position or any angle of attack for the 90 would be, the path would be 0. However, on a 45-degree angle, 1 degree down is 1 degree out. And then on a wedge, say you're swinging on the yellow, so 1 degree down would be half a degree out. So you have these geometric ratios that we can utilize in order to put the ball position where we need to. Listen, if I was going to enter a long drive contest tomorrow, I would put the golf ball 6 balls up. I would shift my horizontal swing plane 6 degrees to the right, and I would absolutely hit the 6 degrees up on a 45-degree horizontal swing plane, swinging 6 degrees out with the face 3 degrees to the right. And that would hit the highest, lowest spinning push draw back to the target line and just hit these slings like Bryson does, or at least hope to. However, I know that my cone is going to be wider because now as I continue the rise of that handle, if you look close to the board on the left image, the circle, the rise of the handle swinging 6 degrees up is going to be the most. It's going to be the furthest out. I'm going to now introduce a ulnar and supinated couple of the lead wrist, and that can make the golf ball go in any direction. So I use that sparingly with wide open fairways, not the 72nd hole of a tournament where I need to hit in the fairway, put it on the green, 2-putt, raise trophy. It's a little bit different. So time and place and form. You're not going to gun, a Formula One race car on a 35-mile-per-hour, back road. You shouldn't. Doesn't mean you can't, but knowing time and place. And that's where I think studying the golf swing on a strokes gained mentality in a lab in Denton, New York, in Denton, Texas, doesn't make sense. It's swing speed means it's a low-hanging fruit, but doesn't actually translate to a skill set. So strokes gained, Lucas lost strokes gained on 18, no doubt off the tee. He won the tournament. What do you want to play?
Okay, let's make this the very last question. This has been an amazing hour, guys. Can't thank you enough for your time. But okay, last one from John. So are there any feels or pieces you commonly add or get players to add on uphill lies to help them shallow the club a bit more in those scenarios? For example, might you get them to feel an increased extension of the spine at P8 or 9? Fascinating seminar, guys. Thanks for your info and time.
That's a great question. You're not hitting uphill or side hill lies with the driver, obviously, hopefully. So I would try to take curve off or add curve, depending on the lie, utilizing the arcs. We have a system for describing the arcs and the follow through, or you'd have a very more radial to take off curve and more ulnar to add curve, adding draw curve. So I would modify it like that. And there was another question on short game. You would absolutely apply these stack tilt principles with bunkers in order, you don't have power requirements for a bunker shot. So you wouldn't add any hip turn, shoulder turn. You would use your wrists a little bit more with a lot more radial to add more spin loft, to hit it higher, to stop it shorter. Horrible for a driver, great for a wedge out of a greenside bunker. So the application of the right skill based on a systematic approach is what we do every day as instructors.
Fantastic, boys. That hour flew, that's for sure. So, yeah, can't thank you enough for your time. Everyone, thank you so much for attending. I'll be sending this out and I'll do a follow-up email. We recorded the whole thing, so you can rewatch this in your own time. But obviously, Nick's available on Skillest to teach you anytime you want. So I'll send out an email with all of Nick's details to his Skillest account. You can even, I think Nick's offering like 20-minute onboarding experiences at the moment, where you can actually have a Zoom with him and chat about what it would be to learn about stack and tilt on Skillest and then work with him remotely. So I'll send all those details out. So once again, thanks, boys. So Mike, thank you very much. It was great to meet you. That was the first time I've met you, and I'm sure there'll be many more interactions from here on. So thanks so much for being here, guys, and we'll see you all soon.
Rudy,
Thanks,
Richie,
Thanks,
thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks, Dave.